What's up, gang? Today we're going to review real quick a project setup, estimates, and cost coding QuickBooks Online. We're going to focus on the cost coding portion for this client that I'm working on. It's a smaller shell company, and I just wanted to review the same thing we reviewed in a prior video, the items versus accounts, on just some of the item hierarchies and some construction accounting. In this case, we're going to be looking at a structure that's used for QuickBooks Online versus QuickBooks Desktop Enterprise, which was what we used on the previous video. So the system in one line, each field answers a different question. Keep the dimensions separate. So the idea is we wanted to track the dimensions by cost type and by phase for this particular client, and QuickBooks Online does allow us to do that. We can also do it on Enterprise by using classes as well. However, in this case, we were using the QuickBooks Online Advanced for this client. So we should be asking ourselves these questions on these steps. So step 1, project, which job? Step 2, class phase, when and where. So in this case, it's going to be second floor for the shell contractor. For general contractors, obviously going to expand a lot more. Electricians, plumbers, you might have your pre-slab, your post-rough and underground, different phases of the job, so we can analyze cost accordingly. And then the parent item is what work, right? Or what cost type. What work. And then on the sub item, we're going to actually analyze the cost type, or we're going to be tagging the cost type to be able to analyze in the future. And then the description, just additional detail, right? So this is going to give us multiple dimensions of reporting, so we can better analyze our projects and have better estimates moving into the future. This is also going to give us better estimates in general. All right, well, here we go. Going a little bit crazy there. All right, so for this client, this was kind of like the base structure that I started with based off of their estimates. As you can see, kind of like the wood floor structure, formwork, and roof structure are a little bit more related to phase. There was certain I was okay with leaving these as the parent item, and the client to be able to have the client's item structure close to the current estimate. I didn't want to just revamp the whole system. I didn't think it was necessary from using like a CSI type format or just kind of ripping out the entire thing. I think they just kind of needed a little bit more structure so they can have better dimensional reporting, as well as a cost code approval structure for their operations internally to make sure that accounting history is accurate. So now we're going to review the hierarchy on this part over here of the slide. So this is an example of just concrete, right? So we have the parent item concrete, which is what we will use to actually bill a customer, and we'll use it as our invoice to show construction income. We're going to have the sub items that are mapped to their respective cost of goods sold accounts, which we will actually use on our bills to recognize cost. And consequently, when we're using project estimates specifically on QuickBooks Online, this is where we're going to be showing our budgeted cost. Now, step 1, create the customer and project. So just discussing a little bit of the flow when we're getting an estimate out there to a customer, we want to make sure, create the customer, create the project. We're going to follow this nomenclature. This is kind of the BEAA standard. If you have another standard for your company, go ahead and feel free to use it. This is the one that we like. The year the project's engaged in the sequence of projects. I feel like for these larger scope, less service call type businesses works very well. What we're going to do is once we go ahead and create the project, we're going to create our project estimate in QuickBooks Online under that project. And then we're going to go ahead and populate the parent items to show what we're going to bill a client, our income. And then we're going to populate our sub items to show our cost by cost type under the parent item. So standard phase classes. So the way that we're going to track phases is we're going to actually be using classes at the transaction level to be able to see where we are spending based on phase. This client phase was a big part of them. For most larger contract type contractors or tradesmen, you are going to want to be tracking your cost by phase. It's a very useful dimension. And for here, they just, very simple. Site preparation, foundation, ground floor, second floor, roof. They're pretty much building two-story homes, two-story kind of starter home type houses. So This is a pretty simple. Oop, here we go. Here we go with my wild mouse again. All right. So the way that we're going to do QBO setup, turn on class tracking. We're going to assign classes by row, and then we're going to create the phase list, and then we're going to use the class on every line item. So whenever we're bringing in costs, we're going to have our concrete purchase materials, and we're going to be tracking the phase based off of class. So now we're going to build a project estimate. Cool, we kind of already talked about this, so we'll blow through this real quick. And we're just going to enter the customer rate and contract amount. We're going to be using the parent account. Remember, very important. We don't want to actually show the customer like by sub item level what our construction income and cost is going to be, even though cost is going to be hidden. I like to just show the client the amount based off of the parent item. Then we're going to assign the phase class to the line. We're going to use description and memo for the component detail. Use the parent again when invoicing. Just a quick reminder, remember invoicing, boom, we're using parent accounts to not use the sub item level. All right, continuing to the sub items. So in this example, we have concrete and purchase materials. We're going to enter your rate and budgeted cost. If you want to use unit of measurement and quantities, go for it. I personally like it. Really depends on the administrative burden on your accounting team, and and how much time they'll actually have to sit there to break apart invoices. For small and medium sized businesses, the smaller you are, the less you can afford to burden your accounting, because most of the time they're kind of doubling as office admin and they might not be an actual accountant. But this is the important, as if you're trying to invest in growth, of hiring one specific accountant, or might contract a firm where we will actually go in and go to that level of detail, because later on analysis you're going to have more dimension. Is it necessary in every stage of the business? No. Those are things that you should add as you're planning on expanding and growing in the future, to just make your historicals more accurate, and it'll make your estimates better, give you better analysis. Just a quick thought that I want to share, on the importance. Somebody might say, why the hell do I care what, my units of measurements or quantities? And sometimes it may be useful. I have found, maybe not every client, but I have found some clients where this level of dimension had added just like one thing that we caught, that we analyzed, we found out how to buy it better, and it just led to hundreds of thousands. In some cases, the largest savings that I've seen from this strategy has been over $1 million in a single year. So the thing that I want to point out is, I was listening to a Alex Hormozy video, and he talks about how why Facebook kind of took over MySpace, and it's because MySpace's KPI as an organization was just to create more accounts monthly, and Facebook focused on monthly active users. So what does that tell you? That means that the KPI that Facebook was using meant that they were focusing on actual engagement rather than just creating new users. So how does this apply to additional dimensions in accounting? So when we're using different dimensions in accounting, we're looking at different KPIs, and we're identifying different KPIs that will be different against different industries, sub-industries, and the size of the business, where you're at. So when you're looking at a KPI, sometimes that KPI changes your North Star. And that small change might be giving you windows of opportunity that you are now starting to see that the guy next to you doing the exact same thing is not. So that's where I see like a lot of clients, they hesitate on expanding their accounting, or they want like their same cousin to just do accounting and office admin because they've done it and things haven't broken. But you're going to stagnate. There's competition out there doing this every day, and the amount of money that you could save from a window of opportunity that you don't even know exists because your accounting is not up to date. I mean, it'll pay excessive accounting fees for the next 10 years in the first year at sometimes. It's not a guarantee, but it sure as hell is better than doing nothing and not trying to grow and trying to be a mom and pop shop in a highly competitive world with things like AI stepping in. So I thought that was a very interesting lesson to share, and relevant to whether you want to do units of measurements or quantity. So continue, use the same phase class as the scope line, use the same sub items later on actual cost, customer facing estimates, hides cost and margin. So this is just part of how the project estimate works, and you actually see it says hidden on the columns that will not be shown to the customer. is just an example of how this mapping works. So for in this example, we're looking at the concrete parent item and the sub item. So concrete, we're going to, let's say we're billing the customer. We're going to go, this is what they're going to see when we use this parent item to bill on the invoice. And then you're going to see class phase, second floor, and we can put a description slab, or we can be a little bit more elaborate in case we wanted more, be able to track it different in the future. And then here are our sub items. You can see revenues 0. And then it's just basically where we are tracking our costs. So how does this work in our step-by-step on application? So we basically, we talked about, we need to create the customer, we create the project, we create the estimate, sends to the customer. Let's say, okay, cool, customer accepted the estimate. It's now an active project into our system. We're now starting to incur costs in this project, or we're planning to. So for the accounting to be accurate, and this is where the administrative burden increases on your accountant. Most of the times, people are just flinging receipts everywhere, and you're just getting your 1 or 2 accountants to just tag everything as best as they could, and there might not be a lot of structure. Your project management may be tied down, or them where to do it, and the dimensions of your accounting may be so broad. They're tagging things like purchase materials, subcontractor, without any phase or without any work type or no parent and sub item structure. So it's very general, and then it becomes very difficult to analyze later. So what I have my staff do here at the firm for any project that we work on, or any premium clients that we're engaged with, is whenever we receive an invoice, right? This is an example. We got concrete, this invoice number, this was the amount. And then what we do is the project manager that is responsible for that project, for the approvals, or whoever it is. What we normally do is we normally have this just sent in a quick email, forward from your phone, very fast. Have the guy send it to you via WhatsApp, a receipt that they are out on the field that you approved. Grab that, forward it to the whatever AP email, and just include this cost code real quick. I have this copied and pasted in my notes for whenever I'm approving for any projects that I'm working on. And how was it paid? Which Amex? If it was paid straight from operating, or something that I paid through like a QuickBooks invoice. Which project does this pertain to? The nomenclature, right? Very important, just to make sure that our accounting's on the same page. Remember, our accountant's on the field, and most of the time your AP person has no idea the difference between 2601 and 2605. So we got to make that very clear for them. Phase class, very important too. The accountant's not going to know if your block was for first floor or second floor. They're not going to know if the concrete was for a stem wall, for your second floor slab, or your roof slab if you're doing rooftop terraces. So very important for our PMs to include this. Next one is cost code. Let them know, hey, this is concrete purchase materials. We're giving them the phase, giving them the project, giving them what it was paid on, which is very helpful. This is not extremely crucial because the receipts may give us some information, but I have found that the half a second the project manager is going to take to identify this saves 10 to 15 seconds or more on the accounting side on which accounts they're actually tagging it to. So it just helps your entire engine work smoother. Approved by, very important. So if whoever is approving, sending that approval, that has the authority to do it, they need to make sure that they have these, that they include their full name, right? And most of the time I have the AP take the receipt, save it with the invoices in the case that it's a firm or a company that's digitized, or if a company likes to use more of a paper process, this will actually be a signature on a stamp on an invoice. And then description or memo in case that project manager wants to include any additional notes that should be included by the accountant in the description and memo for analysis later. So then here in the QBO entry, as you can see, it goes ahead and translates very smoothly. There's a hard rule. There is no cost that will go in to a construction company's books at our firm that we manage that does not have an approval, right? So anyone that's, doing more of our consulting clients that we're not handling your operational accounting, this is a hard rule you need to implement. And I know it seems like annoying or a little bit more work, but guess what? To be the next boss in the video game, you are going to have to do something a little bit different and do a little bit more work. And this is a fundamental part of getting your construction company to the next level. So as we kind of talked about previously, just keeping the dimensions separate, right? This is all going to help us for reporting later. So later I can run a report, so sort it by class to see which concrete purchase materials belong to which and class and phase, and I can start taking out my square footages or my number of block or number of linear feet, and I can kind of go in there and carve a little bit more and add dimensions later at analysis that I'm not necessarily burdening my accountants down if my company is smaller with, or if my company is larger, have them do those unit of measurement and quantity dimensions on the front end, and then I can go ahead and spend less time carving that out when I'm doing my analysis, and my analysis is a little bit quicker. So it's kind of a fine line that you want to be playing with when deciding on how deep of a dimension you want to go with your accounting department. And then, like I said here, description memo, just another thing to help analysis. So this structure gives us, really good estimate versus actual, right? When we created our estimate in the beginning, and we're looking at our income by parent item and putting our cost by sub item, we're looking at job profitability, right? Because we're tagging all of these to the correct job with the cost code approvals, with the approval structure. We have cost by item that just gives a very helpful and necessary, and I think this is like, you cannot have a construction company or a trades company without at the very least having some sort of item structure. And then we have a phase by class structure, which works really well for the shell client. This works for great smaller to medium-sized contractors. Probably anyone south of $10 million a year of construction can really get away with or can really do a lot with just a simple structure as the one that I'm presenting here. So after step one, these are just kind of additional steps for this other client that we're doing. We're doing a big historical project adjustment. They previously were not doing project-based accounting. They were tracking it via some accounts on the chart of accounts. So it was just very, it was not an accountant doing the accounting, and they just grew to the level where they realized they needed an accountant, and they retained our firm. So make sure that all the customers are properly created, make sure that all the projects have their nomenclature, all the active projects. Class tracking is set on, and we're making sure that they're one to each row for the transactions. Standard phase classes are created. Every parent uses the 5 standard cost sub items. That's another very important rule that we have here at the firm. Project estimate includes contract pricing plus internal budget. So to make sure that all our budgets are correct for our active projects, so our analysis moving forward is correct, and make sure that the client is trained and their team is trained on the approver stamps. That, like I mentioned earlier, that if this doesn't work, nothing that I'm doing or I can sell this client is going to potentially work. If you go to the doctor and he says you're diabetic, and you go and you just keep doing the same thing you did to become diabetic, well, that doctor, no matter how good he is not going to save you. So this is a very important part, and we will handhold clients throughout the process to make sure that their team is implementing this correctly. So besides that, that's the end of this little walkthrough for the shell company's items and accounts structure that we're doing. And feel free to contact the firm and visit us online at brandonedward.com, and we'll be happy to answer your questions.